a loving father of two.
Era muy buen padre, la verdad.
He was extremely hardworking, very likable, very personable.
Is ruthlessly killed outside his home.
There was numerous gunshot wounds to his upper torso.
Whoever shot the victim was extremely angry and was sending a message.
Detectives hunt a cold-blooded murderer.
We identified the weapon as an AK-47.
We received a text message that said, "Nobody messes with me."
People were fearing for their lives because the killer was still out there.
The question starts to creep in of, is this one that may never be solved?
Then, one phone call changes everything.
He said that he was in fear for his life, for what he was going to tell us.
We thought, wow, this is the first break that we've had.
Exposing a killer no one saw coming.
It hit you in the gut. It was somebody that you just never really would have expected.
Le quitó un padre y a mí la mitad de mi corazón.
Come out here to go skiing, snowboarding, and in the summer months, it's hiking, bicycling, fishing.
It's beautiful, the weather's always sunny. There's always an outdoor aspect that is just the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
One early fall morning in 2016 turns into a nightmare for the town of Mammoth.
Mammoth Lakes Police Department received a 911 call at approximately 1:50 in the morning, reporting just hearing a series of rapid gunfire and that a neighbor across the street had been shot.
Police and first responders race to the scene.
Patrol officers found the victim lying in the driveway, and he was lying face down in his own blood.
You had an individual who'd been shot multiple times and the victim's wife standing there, and she's hysterical.
Y yo quise abrazar a Omar, me acuerdo. Y alguien dijo, no lo toques, no lo toques. Yo le dije, pero ¿y por qué no? Si es mi esposo. Quiero saber que él esté bien.
Paramedics arrive and try to resuscitate the victim.
La ambulancia llegó rápido, pero como Omar recibió muchos disparos en el cuerpo, Omar ya había muerto cuando ellos llegaron.
Police learn the victim is 35-year-old Omar Hernandez, and a homicide investigation is launched.
When I arrived on scene, I've never seen anything like that. Omar had approximately 15 gunshot wounds to his body.
There were bullet impact marks all over. In total, there was 30 shell casings that were found.
The victim was laying alongside his vehicle. There was numerous gunshot wounds to his upper torso. His vehicle was still running, coffee cup still laying there, all indications that he was getting ready to go somewhere.
What was also noticed was there were divots that were in the asphalt and in the driveway.
We definitely got the feeling that as the victim laid there, he was continuously being shot.
I felt like it was extremely personal. Whoever shot the victim was extremely angry and was sending a message.
The shell casings provide another surprising but valuable clue.
The caliber of the bullet that was used, that only comes from a high-powered assault rifle.
It was a 7.6 millimeter round, so we believed it had to be an AK-47. To have a weapon of that sort here in Mammoth, I thought was extremely unusual because those are assault weapons. Those are not hunting rifles.
We thought it was potentially gang-related, possibly some sort of hit that somebody definitely wanted to get the job done.
Could this have been a planned execution? Detectives try to speak with Omar's wife, Gladys.
Gladys was hysterical, extremely upset, unable to talk, and she was screaming.
Estaba devastada por mi dolor, devastada por el dolor de saber que Omar había muerto. Y estaba, pues, perdida porque decía, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué le hicieron esto a Omar?
Born in 1980, Omar was raised by a single mother in Guadalajara, Mexico, but knew his destiny lay elsewhere.
El sueño de Omar era exacto, venir a Estados Unidos, porque sabía que aquí había más oportunidades. Su visión era crecer, salir adelante y sacar adelante a su mamá.
When Omar was 18 years old, he headed to Mammoth on the advice of a friend, and for 8 years had been successfully working his way up at the same company.
Omar had a good job here in Mammoth. He was a supervisor at the Vaughn's grocery store, which is the main grocery store in Mammoth Lakes.
He was extremely hardworking, very likable, very personable.
At work, Omar was known to be a kind and caring, almost big brother figure to a lot of the employees that he supervised. He took them under his wing and really tried to help them feel like they belonged.
In 2006, Omar met Gladys Gastelum, and romance quickly blossomed.
Lo conocí y amor a primera vista. Sentí que era una gran persona, un hombre increíble.
Omar and Gladys started a family, welcoming the arrival of 2 sons.
Omar, como padre, era fantástico. Era muy buen padre, la verdad.
The young family had a bright future, starting with an event planned for just days after Omar's murder.
Venía toda mi familia de México. Íbamos a bautizar a Mateo. Yo estaba emocionada por el bautizo de mi hijo y porque venía toda mi familia.
Instead of a celebration, Omar's loved ones must now organize a funeral. Looking for answers, detectives questioned Gladys about the hours leading up to the shooting.
She had gone to visit a family member, and Omar stayed home, and she came home right around 10 or 10:30 p.m. that night, and Omar was sleeping.
He was trying to get a good night's sleep before the night shift.
According to Gladys, at approximately 1:30 in the morning, Omar had gotten up, made himself some coffee, and went outside to start the car, to warm it up.
Omar siempre entraba a despedirse y me dio un beso y me dijo, te amo.
And then shortly after he exited the back door to go to work, she heard the loud gunfire that made her jump up.
Se escucha una ráfaga de muchos disparos y yo me paro asustada. Yo nada más pedí a Dios que no fueran para Omar, que cuidara a Omar porque iba saliendo de mi casa.
So she got dressed really quick, ran outside, and that's when she saw Omar lying face down in the driveway.
Y empiezo a gritar ayuda, por ayuda. Y le dije al vecino, llama al 911, porque Omar no está bien, algo le hicieron a Omar. Le dije, le dispararon a Omar.
When police ask if anyone held a grudge against Omar, Gladys's response is immediate.
The name of Saul Morales came up. Saul Morales had a problem with Omar because Saul had always accused Omar of having an extramarital affair with his wife, Rosalinda, who was also an employee at the Vaughn's supermarket.
About a year or so before the murder occurred, investigators learned that Saul had actually gone to Omar and Gladys's home, trying to confront Omar over whether these affair rumors were true.
There were disputes between Omar and Saul.
Gladys tells investigators that Saul's behavior had been disturbing.
Saul had confronted her, told her that my wife is having an affair with your husband.
She noticed that he had been driving by the house on a regular basis.
Gladys says she had seen Saul drive by her house as recently as just 3 days before Omar was killed. Things became so bad, Gladys tells police that Omar filed a restraining order against Saul.
That was an attempt for Omar to get Saul to stop coming to his house, stop contacting his wife.
Could Saul's jealous rage have driven him to murder?
Gladys indicated that she was afraid of Saul, and she thought maybe he was so upset over this alleged affair that he possibly could have killed Omar.
And so Saul became a person of interest pretty quickly. At that moment, we felt like, okay, maybe this is the guy.
Coming up, investigators uncover a menacing grudge.
He hated Omar,
He was there to teach Omar a lesson.
not his motive to murder somebody.
And shocking clues.
The sedan pulled over near where the crime scene occurred.
It was the same vehicle that we'd seen in the video surveillance.
The shell casings recovered were fired from the same gun.
Before a surprise confession reveals a cold-blooded killer.
He described how he just continued to shoot.
Nunca imaginé que él hubiera hecho algo tan desgarrador, algo tan triste.
That was alarming. I knew right then it was huge.
Hernandez was gunned down in his own driveway. His wife Gladys has pointed police towards a possible killer.
Saul Morales was the first suspect in this case because his wife, Rosalinda, had reportedly been having an affair with Omar.
We found out that Saul confronted Omar about the affair.
Saul told Omar to leave his wife alone.
Omar was upset that Saul had come over to his house while his kids were home.
There was a fight that broke out between them and police were called.
Officers arrived on scene and they were separated. No charges were filed, but there still was a documented incident. Gladys did not believe that Omar really did have an affair with Rosalinda. But the important thing was if Saul believed it to be true, then that is motive to murder somebody.
Needing more information about the alleged affair, investigators head to Omar's workplace.
The coworkers described Omar as a nice guy who got along with everybody.
The manager described Omar as a very hardworking person dedicated to the job, was that employee that worked over and beyond what was required of him.
The manager did tell me that he had heard the rumors about Rosalinda and Omar's extramarital relationship. And also, he did bring up the fact that at times he would see Saul in Vaughn's walking through the aisles as though he wanted to catch Omar and Rosalinda together.
Learning Saul's wife, Rosalinda, happens to be working her shift at the store, detectives pull her aside for an interview.
She was very, very emotional.
Rosalinda found out about the murder when she came in to work and became very upset.
Investigators confront Rosalinda about the rumors.
Rosalinda denied that there was ever an affair or that there was any sexual relations between her and Omar.
She said that her and Omar's relationship was purely platonic and that her and him had been best friends, and that's the extent of their relationship.
Rosalinda definitely gave me the sense that she was nervous.
In talking to Rosalinda, she appeared to be holding back.
At this point, investigators weren't sure whether the affair was a rumor or whether it was true.
It seemed like the jealousy involved in the case could have been enough for murder. When you see a murder that gruesome, with that many bullets and that much violence, it comes out of some strong emotion.
Police know that even if Saul had motive for murder, he also needed the opportunity.
We asked Rosalinda where Saul was the previous night, and Rosalinda said that Saul was in bed with her the whole night, and then she ended up getting up for work around 3 that morning, and he was still in bed.
I wouldn't say that that particular alibi was rock solid, so interviewing him was very important, just to find out if their stories matched.
Investigators bring Saul down to the station.
When I interviewed Saul, he was extremely calm, extremely courteous, and extremely cooperative.
He was very forthcoming about the altercations that had occurred with Omar in the past, and that he was afraid that Omar had had an affair with his wife.
Investigators ask Saul to account for his movements in the hours leading up to the murder.
Saul claimed that he had gone to visit his uncle, and he was with his uncle throughout the night before coming home, and went to bed right around 11 o'clock that evening.
He said that he was asleep in his bed on the night of the murder and had nothing to do with it. He voluntarily provided a DNA reference sample to exclude him.
Getting DNA from Saul was extremely important because he was a prime suspect in the shooting, and because with fingerprints coming off the bullet casings, you could match the DNA.
Saul also allows detectives to search his home.
I searched the house for weapons, ammunition, or any evidence that could tie him to the crime. But I never found anything that would lead me to believe he had weapons or ammunition in the house.
When the results come in, Saul's DNA does not match the DNA found on the spent shell casings.
His story seemed to be making sense. It seemed to be consistent. There was no indicators that he was lying to us.
And so we didn't have anything to really move on.
I didn't find him to be suspicious. He just wasn't connecting the dots for me. And from my training and experience, he did not give me any indication that he was involved in the shooting. And so that was really frustrating.
With detectives forced to put Saul on the back burner, they revisit the theory that Omar's murder could have been a professional hit.
The weapon used, the AK-47, it's a weapon of murder, a weapon of violence. And so the nature of that weapon alone made people think this has something to do with a gang.
Because of the brutal nature of the crime, something we were looking at, is this the cartel? Is this a paid hit? It's gotta be big because of the way it was done.
His home in Mammoth Lakes, California, now suspect he might have been targeted by a criminal gang.
There was speculation that maybe this was a drug deal that went bad and the cartel had come up and put a hit on Omar. Investigators went looking through Omar's background to see if there was any drug affiliations or anything that could have been tied to organized crime.
I didn't find anything in Omar's background that would indicate he had any gang association whatsoever.
No pertenecía a pandillas, él era una persona tranquila, no usaba drogas, no usaba nada.
Investigators move on from the gangland hit theory. Several days later, they discover their security camera footage from a building near Omar's home and hope the video will provide new leads.
The closest camera that had any video surveillance was several hundred yards down the street, so you were capturing vehicles coming and going.
Unfortunately, there were no cameras that were able to actually capture the crime as it occurred.
What the security footage documented was a vehicle circling the area several times prior to the shooting.
We had what we believed was a light-colored four-door sedan. We felt pretty confident that it was a Toyota Camry or Toyota Corolla. We felt like that vehicle possibly was involved.
Police spot another suspicious vehicle in the footage.
There was a red sedan-type vehicle that was seen at the intersection, driving down towards the victim residence.
What was notable was it appeared less than 2 minutes prior to when the murder took place, and then the sedan pulled over near where the crime scene occurred.
Unfortunately, with the low image quality, we weren't able to identify who was in the suspect vehicles.
Undeterred, police show the footage to Omar's wife, hoping she can identify the vehicles. The red sedan provokes a strong reaction.
Gladys said that the day after the shooting, a red sedan drove by with two people inside of it that she recognized as Vaughn's employees. She did say that they gave her a slow roll type of look, as though letting her know they were watching her, or maybe even they were involved.
Sentí miedo en ese momento porque cuando ellos pasan manejando y luego le hacen así, yo sentí mucho temor, sentí miedo.
Gladys told investigators that the two individuals in the car were Jose Antonio Correas Vasquez and Eliud Correas Vasquez. They were cousins. Gladys knew Eliud and Jose Antonio as co-workers of Omar's.
At the time, their reputation was that they were MS-13 gang members from El Salvador.
Detectives head to Vaughn's to talk with Jose Antonio and Eliud's co-workers.
Employees did tell me that Omar was the supervisor for the Salvadorians, and it appeared that they didn't like Omar, they didn't like taking orders from him.
Investigators learn that Omar had been promoted to a management position a few months before his murder, and that there was constant friction between him and Eliud.
Eliud and Omar did not get along. In fact, there had actually been an incident between the two of them where Eliud had been sent home for not doing his job properly.
Eliud became so upset that he contacted the union and made a formal complaint against Omar.
Did Eliud take matters into his own hands with deadly consequences? There's one more detail about him that raises suspicions.
Eliud drove a red sedan, and it seemed to be a possible match to the car that was on the surveillance video. However, when we looked closer at the red sedan and Eliud's red sedan, it was clear immediately that they did not match, and that was not Eliud's car in that surveillance video.
With Eliud looking less likely as the killer, investigators turn their focus to his cousin, Jose Antonio.
He claimed to have some association to some gangs. We subsequently served a search warrant at his residence. We did find assault weapons, although they ended up being imitation airsoft type weapons, so obviously they weren't involved in the actual murder itself.
We didn't find any definitive ties to Salvadorian gangs. I think it was just their bravado, and they had a heavy reputation, and they knew people were afraid of them.
Without anything concrete linking Jose Antonio or Eliud to Omar's death, detectives are forced to move on.
That was just super frustrating. It just seemed like at every corner there was something that we thought was going to really point us in the right direction and really break the case open for us, and it just was another dead end.
Just as the case threatens to hit a wall, investigators scouring Omar's cell phone activity make a jaw-dropping discovery.
In combing through thousands and thousands of text messages, we did find many text messages where he and Rosalinda spoke to each other, and it became very clear that the rumors of the affair were definitely true. It also became apparent that not only was there an affair with Rosalinda, but that Gladys knew about the affair.
That was a cause for concern because initially the affair was denied by all parties at first when the investigation began.
The texts force investigators to rethink everything. Why did Gladys and Rosalinda lie? Were either of them trying to cover up for a crime? And had Saul learned the truth and done the unthinkable?
There was a lot of evidence that showed that there were enough emotional ties involved in that somebody could be angry enough to kill someone based off of that infidelity.
2. Omar Hernandez was brutally gunned down. Detectives have just obtained proof a rumored affair between Omar and coworker Rosalinda did actually take place.
Omar was involved romantically with Rosalinda, and through cell phone forensics, we located text messages that definitely confirmed that Omar had a conversation with Gladys as well about the affair that confirmed that she knew about it.
Gladys had previously told police there was nothing to the rumored affair, so investigators had to speak to her again.
When we asked Gladys about the affair, she broke down crying, and she confirmed the rumors to be true.
Gladys described how she found out about the affair with Rosalinda back in 2014. She had returned home early from a trip to Mexico, and when she came back to their house, Omar wasn't there, but there was burned wax and rose petals on the bed, on the floor around it, and she knew they weren't for her. So a couple days after, she ended up going through her husband's phone and found the text messages between Omar and Rosalinda, which confirmed to her that he had had an affair.
Detectives asked Gladys why she lied to them before. What was she trying to hide?
Her reasoning behind lying about the affair was simply to protect Omar's reputation. He had a good reputation, and she wanted to maintain that. And also, according to Gladys, they were working through their problems to keep their family together.
She just didn't want to have anything negative to say about her husband. He'd been brutally murdered. She kind of wanted to leave it at that. Let's investigate and try to figure out the person responsible.
Police are also curious why Rosalinda had been untruthful and bring her into the station.
And told her we knew that she did have an affair with Omar. She told us that she lied because she was embarrassed about it, but also that she didn't want to inflame things with Saul.
We asked her whether he knew about the affair or not. She confirmed that he did know about it. She was definitely concerned about her husband.
I asked her flat out if she believed that Saul may have killed Omar, and her answer to my question was, I don't believe he pulled the trigger. So of course that was alarming. I thought maybe I missed something at the beginning and that there was a potential that Saul may have actually even hired someone to kill Omar. It presents difficulty because then you have to backtrack and look at the initial suspect once again and make sure you haven't overlooked anything.
Investigators re-look at Saul, but after combing through phone records and text, find no evidence he hired anyone to kill Omar or that he committed the crime himself.
At this point, the evidence did not bear fruit that Saul was the suspect we were looking for. His alibi checked out. There was nothing else that ever came up that pointed him as being the one who did this.
Saul is cleared once again. With yet another busted lead and no arrest in sight, police have to contend with the fear that's gripping Mammoth Lakes.
It was pretty hard for the community to have all these investigations going on and talk of murder and gossip of violence and the things that led to it, but no answers, just dead ends. I think people genuinely were fearing for their lives because the killer was still out there.
Afectó a la comunidad porque todos vivían en pánico, porque todos se preguntaban por qué pasó esto, por qué en un pueblo tan chico, donde nunca había pasado nada así. No había explicación y pienso que la gente sí tuvo miedo.
Despite months of tireless work, investigators run out of leads.
The case essentially went cold. There was nothing to indicate any one person was responsible.
At this point, we're well over a year into the investigation, and the question starts to creep in of, is this one that may never be solved? It starts to weigh on you because we've formed relationships with Gladys and we want nothing more than to bring justice for her family.
It definitely wears on you as an investigator. You constantly ask yourself, what did I miss? There's got to be something there that I missed.
Fue uno de los puntos más difíciles para mí también. Pero siempre tuve fe de que algún día, dije, así pasen años, se va a solucionar porque no puede quedar la muerte de Omar impune. De esa manera como él murió, no puede quedar así.
We had always been feeling that if we could just get that one piece of information that could lead us to the suspect, we'll develop the rest. But we needed somebody to come forward and give us a break that we needed to solve that case.
2.5 years later, detectives receive just that. An explosive phone call that upends the whole case.
In June 2019, a person called and said that they know who killed Omar and has some concerns for their own safety.
In my mind, I felt that that's the big break that we needed. Sometimes that's all it is, one person with information. I knew right then.
Information that blows the case wide open.
A man by the name of Francisco Ramirez came into our office, and you could tell that something was scaring him. He said that he was in fear for his life, for what he was going to tell us. Francisco started telling us about this individual. His name was Josue Correas Vasquez, and he was a co-worker at Vaughn's. They both worked the night shift.
Francisco worked with Josue, and Josue was actually the brother to Eliud, and he describes this contentious relationship between Omar and Eliud and Josue. Months before the murder, says that they were constantly butting heads with one another, described Eliud and Josue as constantly disrespecting Omar. Omar would delegate tasks that need to be completed, and Eliud and Josue would always be disrespectful and say, well, why do we got to do that? Nah, I don't think so. Was just constantly kind of challenging him.
Josue had actually told Francisco that he hated Omar because he had been disrespected and that he had threatened to fire his whole family, and that he had to take matters into his own hands. Then, just several hours after the murder had occurred, Francisco told us that he received a text message from Josue, and it said something to the effect of, "See, I'm not playing around." And then there was another text message that said, "Nobody messes with me."
When he saw the text message, he felt very strongly that that is Josue's way of telling him he just murdered Omar.
Francisco then divulges another disturbing piece of information.
Francisco told us that he had actually gone shooting with Josue months prior to the murder. They had gone out in the middle of the forest, and that Josue had brought an AK-47 with him and were just shooting targets. When Francisco mentioned AK-47, obviously all of our ears perked up, as that's the weapon we were looking for.
And then several years after Omar was murdered, Francisco became the manager to take Omar's place at Vaughn's. And he's now in a position to where he needs to delegate, and he's now seeing the same disrespectful tone from Josue. At some point in time, he and Josue got into an argument, and Josue says something to the effect of, "Don't make me do to you what I did to Omar."
We asked Francisco why he is now just coming forward 2.5 years after the murder. And Francisco said that he was scared of Josue.
He was concerned for his safety, and he wanted to tell law enforcement about what he knew, because he said, if something is to happen to me, I want you guys to know who's responsible.
Francisco realized, I could be the one that's next, and this guy needs to be stopped.
Detectives contact Gladys to gather more information about the working relationship between Omar and Josue.
Gladys did tell us that when Josue first came to the States, he didn't have a lot of friends, he didn't know very many people, and Omar had taken Josue under his wing.
Omar was kind to him, would bring him food for lunch breaks, really seemed to keep an eye on Josue and care about his well-being.
Siempre le ponía su lunch para que él comiera en Bonds y siempre me decía, oye Gladys, échale más lunch para convivir, para darle a Josue.
Omar and Josue seemed to get along for many months during that time period. But Gladys told us that once Omar was promoted to supervisor, things started to change between Omar and Josue.
Cuando a Omar le dan el puesto, sí sentía que algo había cambiado. La misma relación de amistad ya no era igual.
Omar had a job to do. And as Omar started giving more direction and instructions to Josue, Josue started to be a bit more belligerent towards him, talking back, refusing to do certain things.
There had been reported conflicts between the two, and that Josue had felt like Omar was on a power trip.
They didn't get along at work. They were constantly arguing with one another.
Could a workplace conflict have turned into murder? Investigators pull the employee timesheets for the night Omar was killed.
We went back through the Vaughn's records from that night to see when people clocked in, and we noticed that Josue did not work at all that night. We also looked into what vehicle does Josue drive.
Detectives are hopeful that Josue's car will be a match to one of the two vehicles spotted in the surveillance footage.
We determined that at the time of the murder in 2016, he did in fact own a 2012 silver Toyota Camry. That vehicle, shortly after the murder, had been resold to another individual. So we ended up finding that vehicle down in another part of California, and it was the same vehicle that we'd seen in the video surveillance.
It matched the color and the make and model of what we were looking for.
At that moment, we felt that we had the person responsible for the murder of Omar.
Needing hard evidence to tie Josue to the murder, detectives head to the area where Francisco had witnessed him firing an AK-47.
It wasn't a designated shooting range. It was a dirt road off of a main highway.
We went out to the range where he said that he shot with Josue, and we were actually able to recover 56 cartridges that were just below the dirt. All of these cartridges were extremely important because as we grabbed the first cartridge we saw. It had the same head stamp of the cartridges found at the murder scene. When we found shell casings, it just really hit you in the gut.
We thought, wow, this is...
Hope they finally got a break after discovering spent bullet casings that appear to match those recovered from the crime scene.
We found north of 50 expended projectiles in the dirt and sent those casings back to the laboratory for comparison.
After we compared the two casings together, one from the murder scene and one from the shooting range, the lab told us that they were fired from the same gun.
This is huge in an investigation. We have an identified suspect and we have physical evidence.
On January 30th, 2020, Josue Correa Vasquez is arrested for Omar's murder.
After Josue was arrested, we brought him in for an interview. We knew that the shell casings recovered at the crime scene were the same as the shooting range. What we didn't have was a way to tie that in to Josue. So what we decided to do was create a fake DNA profile that would be shown to Josue, and what it said was that we recovered DNA from the shell casings and that it matched somebody of the same age and ethnicity as Josue. The goal of having the DNA profile was in hopes that it would push Josue to tell the truth.
Detectives also use another tactic and make an emotional appeal.
Investigator Callanan actually had a photograph of Omar's children on his desk.
I showed him the kids and I said, these kids, they don't deserve what happened to them. Let's try to give them some closure.
They have no father. They just want answers. They want to know.
Josue stuns investigators with what he says next.
No importa, pero los niños sí. Ese día, como cuando ya el odio ya lo invade y ya siente este día lo voy a hacer.
There was a lot of hate against Omar for my part, and that's why me alone decided to kill him.
It was a monumental moment that we felt, okay, we've got the right guy.
The question remains, why would Josue commit such a heinous crime?
Josue told us he hated Omar. He hated that he would tell him how to do his job. He hated that he would be tough on him.
He felt that he was disrespected by Omar, and he was there to teach Omar a lesson.
Josue proceeds to tell investigators what happened that fatal night.
You knew that Omar was going to work at 2 in the morning?
Sí.
He said that he drove by Omar's residence a number of times, confirmed that the vehicle in the video surveillance was in fact his vehicle.
Y vuelta nada para ver si él estaba.
He says he went around the block to see if he was home.
Just before 2 a.m., Josue parked across the street from Omar's home, and he waited for him to come out.
Cuando ya lo vi que él venía saliendo, entonces iba rápido.
He saw Omar come out of his residence, and that was the moment that he'd been waiting for. He grabbed the AK-47. When Omar went to the driver's side of the door to leave, Josue emerged from the trees and yelled at him, "You don't look so invincible now, do you?" and described shooting him several times.
Eso fue lo que le dije, porque no era invencible. Que no era invencible.
He described the look in Omar's face, the surprise, the shock.
How many times did you shoot?
Era mucho el odio. Le disparé todo el cartucho. Como el tercer disparo ya cayó.
He seguiste disparando?
Sí.
And he kept firing.
Josue said that after he murdered Omar, he went home, he went to bed. A lot of Josue's interview is matter of fact, which was chilling in and of itself, that you can have murdered somebody and just be talking about it in such an unemotional way.
Josue admits that several days after killing Omar, he told his brother Eliud what he had done.
Eliud was concerned about the murder weapon and whether it could be traced back to Josue. So Eliud took it upon himself to take the AK-47 to the forest and bury it so no one would ever be able to find it.
Based on Josue's confession, Police bring in Eliud.
He eventually admitted to us that he did help dispose of the gun and gave us the details about where it was, and he pointed to the exact location where the firearm would be recovered.
So we dug right there and sure enough found an AK-47.
At this point, it's kind of a prosecutor's dream. We have a confession statement from the defendant, and the murder weapon that we never thought we would recover just showed up.
For his part in the crime, Eliud is sentenced to a year in jail.
Eliud was charged as being an accessory after the fact. He was charged for helping dispose of the murder weapon and not telling authorities about it.
On January 18th, 2022, Josue is sentenced to 2 life terms in prison for the murder of Omar Hernandez.
El día de la sentencia sentí paz porque se estaba haciendo justicia de la muerte de Omar. Nunca imaginé que Josué hubiera hecho eso. Tan desgarrador, algo tan triste.
The biggest surprise was that it was somebody that you just never really would have expected. Omar had taken Josue under his wing. By all accounts, Omar cared very much about Josue.
That's what was so troubling in this case. Omar lost his life, was brutally murdered for no reason other than he was a hard-working individual who had expectations.
A mis hijos les quitó un padre y a mí la mitad de mi corazón. Eso nos arrancó Josué.
Omar's family still feels the deep impact.
In a church parking lot, a woman is found murdered. The killer leaves few clues and no weapon. A routine suicide investigation takes a macabre twist. Can a camera prove this was murder? And a fire rages in a nursing home, killing 15 residents. Armed only with his photographs, it will take the coroner 6 years to prove this tragedy was no accident. Forensic photographers solved these crimes by preserving crucial details missed by the naked eye. After the evidence is erased, the new detectives must rely on camera clues. In Fairfax County, Virginia, in March 1989, a man called police to report a woman had fallen in an icy church parking lot. An officer reported back from the scene. The woman didn't slip and fall. She was murdered. At police headquarters, forensic photographer Jeff Miller knew he had a long night ahead of him. He packed his equipment and got ready to meet investigators gathering at the scene. Where some officers shoot criminals, Miller shoots film. In his 18 years with the Fairfax Police, he has witnessed countless crime scenes through his lens. If he is the eyes of law enforcement, then his photos are its long-term memory.
Hey, this is the ID we got off of the victim.
Investigators arrived at the parking lot and planned their strategy. Detective Ed Guckenberger headed the investigation. As his team uncovered clues, they depended on Miller. It's in Miller's camera that all the clues come together to solve a case and hopefully to catch a killer.
We want to be able to document the scene, in essence, take the scene from here to the courthouse just exactly the same way that we find it.
Miller began by mapping the crime scene. The initial clues were both simple and brutal. The victim was lying face up in a pool of her own blood. She had been shot several times, with the fatal bullet to her head. Nearby, her purse was found untouched. Robbery was not the motive. Miller first documented the wide view of the crime scene, which was blanketed in darkness. To bring it into focus, Miller used a technique called painting with light. The camera was mounted on a tripod. Its shutter kept open as an assistant covered the lens. The same frame of film was exposed repeatedly as Miller passed along the edges of the scene, firing his flash as many as 24 times for a single picture. Each flash illuminates a slightly different area. This photograph is the result of Miller's work. The bright lights look like street lamps, but they were made by Miller's flash. Though he was holding the flash as it fired, Miller doesn't appear because he was behind the light. He remained invisible as he exposed the evidence. After Miller took his wide shot by painting with light, he moved in to photograph every detail of the scene. He worked his way closer and closer to the victim, documenting her wounds and the position of her body.
You guys see these bloody tire tracks?
Miller discovered some bloody tire tracks near the victim.
It looks like when the vehicle left here, it ran through the pool of blood.
Officers were sent to follow the trail, while others stayed behind to comb for additional clues. Miller found 2 bullet casings. The man who called the police parked his van over them. Miller photographed the evidence where it lay. Moving the van again would only have disturbed more of the crime scene.
Hey guys.
As Miller hunted for additional evidence, officers returned from their search of the neighborhood. They found an abandoned car a block away. They ran the tags. It was registered to the victim's address. The site of the car became a second crime scene. Again, Miller photographed the scene from every angle, hoping to uncover any clues that might explain how the woman ended up so far from her vehicle. As he did at the church parking lot, Miller first photographed the site at a distance, then moved in for close-ups. The driver's side window was shattered. Pellets of glass were strewn about the car's interior. A spent cartridge lay in the snow outside the driver's side door, and a bullet was lodged in the plastic molding. On the passenger's side, Miller found even more. Pressed into the thin snow were footprints, too big to be the victim's. Forensic technicians have a tough time making casts of snowy tracks, and Miller knew the prints would melt with the rising sun. So it was up to him and his camera to preserve the evidence before it faded away.
You can cut it out if it's in ice and try to keep it at a certain temperature and everything else. Well, I guess sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There are different chemicals that you could possibly spray on it to try and keep it. When all in all is said and done, the photograph is the only evidence that was able to totally keep that impression intact.
The search of the neighborhood uncovered more potential evidence. A patrolman found a second car abandoned a half-mile from the church parking lot after apparently skidding off the road. The second car became the third crime scene during this night of sporadic clues. police began to search for a connection. On the seat, an officer found a leather gun holster. He ran the tags on the vehicle. The owner lived just 2 doors from the victim.
Process this scene.
At dawn, Jeff Miller inspected the church parking lot again. He hoped the sun would shed new light on the case. By now, the snow had melted.
We wanted to come back and check the asphalt parking lot and make sure that we collected all the evidence. We don't want to leave anything behind. Once we leave here, you can't come back.
His effort paid off. Daylight revealed fragments of glass buried in the snow the night before. If the glass matched the broken window in the victim's car, police could say the car was in the parking lot when she was killed.
Okay, there's something over here.
The melting snow also revealed a bullet at the edge of the lot.
So tell you what, let me get a couple pictures of it first.
Tests would determine if it matched the bullet found in the victim's car. While Miller checked the parking lot, Ed Guckenberger hit the road. His first stop, the victim's house. In homicide cases, family members are usually the first suspects.
I have to read very quickly once I knock on that door the type of response that I get from that person who opens it. And in this case, I had a husband that was dressed in a bathroom that I had woken up out of his sleep. He stated that his wife should have been home and she was at a church meeting. As a homicide investigator, what you then have to do is you have to read that person. Does he seem sincere? Is this some ploy or something else? Well, there was nothing from what he was telling me to show that he was in any way involved in this.
Confident the husband wasn't involved with the woman's murder, officers followed their next lead. They didn't have far to go. The owner of the second car was the victim's neighbor. He was also no stranger to police. The churchyard murder investigation was less than 10 hours old. So far, Detective Guckenberger had no suspects. His only lead was the owner of the second car. The man police wanted to talk with was Gary Asa Donahue. Ed Guckenberger asked him to come to the station for questioning. To his buddies in his motorcycle gang, Donahue was known as Redneck. Police knew him by his criminal record. Donahue told police he'd been out drinking the night before. When he got home, he realized his dog was loose, so he drove around to look for it. He lost control of his car on the icy road and skidded into a ditch. Unable to get free, Donahue said he walked home. Although his route would have taken him past the victim's car, Donahue told police he didn't see it. He said the holster in his own car belonged to a friend, but he didn't have the gun. Police were suspicious. They asked Donahue for his jacket and boots, which might hold clues that told a different story. Donahue willingly surrendered them. In the darkroom, Miller developed one of his most hopeful leads. Up until now, he'd been merely documenting the various crime scenes. Now, he put his darkroom skills to the test to flush out latent clues. Using the ruler he placed by the icy footprints when he snapped the photo, Miller created a life-size portrait of the prints. A boot print can be almost as telling as a fingerprint, if it's clear enough. Miller was happy with the photo. Armed with this image, it became just a matter of matching the prints to the boots that made them. Miller sent his photographs to a forensic lab for a detailed comparison with Donahue's boots. Lab technicians first examined the size of the boots. If the prints are off, even by a few millimeters, there is no match. The tread pattern was examined next. Technicians pored over the sole of the boot, making sure that every detail matched Miller's photograph. So far, so good. But next came the litmus test, matching the boot to the foot that wore it. It required a close look at the boot's anatomical wear.
Anatomical wear is the wear that each of us impart into the bottom of the shoe based on how tall we are, how much we weigh, our bone makeup, how we walk, whether we walk on the inside of our feet, the outside of our feet, more so on the heel, more so on the toe.
Donahue wore a lift in one of his boots. It added to the unique anatomical wear and left its signature in the boot prints. Last, technicians examined the boots and the photographs for accidental wear and tear, nicks and cuts from daily use.
In this particular case, there are certain marks, certain cuts, certain indentations in the tread pattern that the examiner was able to see in the photograph and was able to find also in the shoe, that he's able to say that this shoe made this impression to the exclusion of all the other shoes in the whole wide world.
The footprint evidence placed Donahue at the victim's car. Guckenberger credits the photographs with keeping the investigation on track.
If we didn't have the photographs of that shoe impression, then we're mainly just stuck with firearms evidence. A person might have a gun, but who actually shoots that gun? But this person wears his own boots.
Investigators then examined Donahue's jacket, combing it meticulously for fibers, hair, cloth, anything that might link Donahue to the victim. They found glass particles. What new information could they provide? Forensic tests determined the glass from the victim's car matched the glass in the parking lot. If the glass from Donahue's jacket matched these samples, it would place Donahue at the site where the car window was shattered and where the victim was killed. The glass matched. Police could now prove that Donahue was in the parking lot and maybe in the car at the time of the murder. The bloody tire tracks were the next link. Because the victim couldn't have driven through her own blood, investigators were able to show she was killed in the parking lot and that somebody else moved her car.
As her car was leaving the scene, it drove through a pool of blood that was coming from her. The blood adhered to the tire, and the rotation of the tire through the parking lot kept leaving a blood transfer onto the ground. And so that's what that was from.
The scattered clues were coming together, thanks in large part to Miller's accurate documentation of the scene. The only thing missing was the murder weapon. To help pinpoint it, investigators tested the bullets and casings found near the victim and her car. Another casing was found in Donahue's car. Lab tests showed all the casings were fired from a rare Hungarian pistol, a 9mm auto-loading Fromer, a gun that peaked in popularity around World War II. Tests of the impression on the holster from Donahue's car matched the impression a Fromer would make. But the gun was nowhere to be found. Police scoured the area and came up empty. Donahue, for all his earlier cooperation, drew the line at providing the gun, swearing he never had it.
And he probably thought that whatever he did with this gun, and I don't know, we never did find that gun, probably thought that he was past all this. That if we didn't have a gun, we probably could not prove he was the one that actually fired the shot or did anything else.
But if there ever was a smoking gun in this case, it was Miller's photographs of the boot prints, something Donahue didn't count on. Officer Miller and Detective Guckenberger began to build their case. With the glass fragments, the shell casings, the bullets, and the ever-important boot prints, they were confident they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Gary Asa Donahue was a killer.
Okay, great.
Miller's photographs became primary evidence before a grand jury, which sent back Donahue's indictment. The photographic clues that Miller provided helped piece together the story of that ill-fated night.
Okay, what I believe happened is that Mr. Donahue's driving down the street. He turns down the wrong street to go to his house, probably because he's drunk.
Donahue lost control of his car and slid off the road. Angry, he got out of the car and began to walk home. As the victim came down the street, she recognized the car. She likely had seen it in her neighborhood for years. Donahue bought it from another neighbor.
Perhaps she's acting as a good Samaritan. She stops to offer him a ride, or perhaps he stepped out on the road and flagged her down. The other possibility is he stepped out on the road with a gun and made her stop for him. They go down the street to the church parking lot. Something occurs inside the car in the church. I don't know what that is. In homicide investigation, you're not always going to be able to answer every single question that you have. She falls down to the ground, lays down on her back, face up. Donahue then has a better target, a non-moving target. He then advances towards her, and as she's lying there on the ground, he puts the gun right up to her face almost and executes her. He then leaves the scene, drives down to the end of the street, where again, for whatever reason, he runs off the road, probably due to his intoxication, runs off the road, wrecks it into the trees. For whatever reason, he decides to clear his weapon. He works the action, the one cartridge casing that's still in the gun, ejects out the broken driver's window, and is found on the ground next to the vehicle.
For whatever reason, he slid across the seat and left by the passenger's side, leaving his boot prints in the snow.
This is your worst type of killer, because this is the person that kills out of meanness. There was no reason at all to kill this woman. She was not, your victim that puts herself in a situation because of a crime. She's not that type of person. She's the type of person that her innocence is what got her into trouble. That day, she ran across an animal.
Gary Asa Donahue was sentenced to life in prison. The senseless death of the woman in the church parking lot shocked the residents of her quiet community. Further south, in Miami, Florida, murder is more common, but no less shocking. Through these doors at the Metro-Dade County Morgue in Florida come every kind of death, both natural and unnatural. As bodies come into the morgue, it's the job of forensic photographers to document wounds and other identifying traits before the corpses are stored. The work is never routine and often tragic. On this day, a 5-year-old girl is the victim of a random shooting. She was caught in crossfire during a parade. Forensic technicians examine her wounds. perhaps they hold the key to the killer. Dade County detectives rely on the information to start their investigation.
We are trying to determine, number one, what caliber of round it was that did strike the victim. And number two, the path of the bullet as it entered the body and then exited. That will help us in trying to determine possibly who our shooter is.
In the medical examiner's office, high-tech photography is as much a tool of the trade as a scalpel. If a death looks suspicious, it's up to forensic photographers to document the details. They start with the wound and then photograph individual organs as the autopsy proceeds. These gruesome photographs survive long after a case is closed. They provide a visual database authorities can refer to if a similar case comes up. Knowing what to look for streamlines any investigation. In 1986, Dade County Police responded to a suicide. Jack Sebastian lay dead, a 12-gauge shotgun by his side. When death is involved, it's standard procedure to capture everything on film.
Did you see anyone enter or leave the house?
The victim's girlfriend told police she was outside when she heard the blast.
I wanted to get everything.
Sebastian left no note. At the morgue, a staff member felt suspicious about Sebastian's wound and called medical examiner Jay Barnhart.
Good morning, Dr. Alvarez. What do you have?
Barnhart mapped and measured the wound. In his initial opinion, this was no suicide. Sebastian was shot almost directly between the eyes. His wound was surrounded by stippling, small speckled burns made by the gunpowder exploding from the shotgun's muzzle. If Sebastian held the gun directly to his head, the gunpowder wouldn't have marked his face. From the stippling, Barnhart knew the gun must have been held some distance from Sebastian's forehead when he pulled the trigger. Something wasn't right, and Barnhart was determined to get to the bottom of it. First, Barnhart ordered photographs of Sebastian's wounds. Then he took X-rays of Sebastian's head to reveal the internal damage he couldn't see. The X-ray showed the path of the pellets.
This is an X-ray showing the dispersion of the birdshot through the skull. And if we take the point of entrance, which is just above the bridge of the nose, and connect that by an imaginary line or series of lines to the location of the pellets, we see that the pellets are to the left and below the point of entrance, meaning that the shot then was coming from above and to the right of the entrance.
Barnhart had to find out if Sebastian could hold the gun at the angle indicated by the X-ray. It wouldn't have been easy. Investigators even placed the shotgun in the extended arms of Sebastian's corpse to see if he could fire the gun. His fingers could barely reach the trigger. Considering all possibilities, investigators tried to fire the gun with their feet. They found they could do it with bare toes. But Sebastian wore round-toed boots, making it impossible for him to fire the gun. These extreme tests were necessary. Barnhart knew that in court, he must be prepared to answer even the strangest questions.
Now I ask you things like, well, couldn't he have been laying in bed and have his foot up over his head and pulled it with his... and if he had not been wearing shoes, you'd probably have to say, yes, he could.
Barnhart wasn't satisfied with his findings. He needed to determine the distance between Sebastian and the gun when it fired. Barnhart and his staff shot a piece of poster board from distances of 1 to 7 feet and examined the damage. From 1 foot away, the force of the shot cracked the board. The impact was enormous. At 2 feet, the impact was less severe as the buckshot began to spread. At 4 feet, the hole roughly doubled in size as the pellets fanned out. At 6 feet from the board, the buckshot dispersed further, leaving clear pellet marks. Barnhart concluded the muzzle of the gun had to be at least 1.5 feet away from Sebastian's head. He was convinced someone else must have pulled the trigger. But Barnhart feared his simple test wasn't enough to sway a jury. He turned to the Forensic Imaging Bureau for help. Todd Reeves runs Dade County's Forensic Imaging Bureau, one of the best in the United States. The Bureau has more than 3,000 square feet of advanced photographic equipment. The well-equipped studios can document huge pieces of evidence while capturing clues invisible to the naked eye. Here, a technician uses a microscope-equipped camera to examine a cast of a jawbone. Her findings will help match a suspect to a bite mark. A potentially useful image may come from a less than perfect source, like a security camera or shot from a moving vehicle. The lab can clean up, enlarge, and enhance photographs. Computers reveal unseen details in evidence photos, bringing clues into focus. A huge computer database of fingerprints can match even the vaguest finger smudge. An editing suite helps investigators assemble persuasive courtroom presentations.
The higher the quality, the better delineation you're giving the jury, the more factual information. And that's what we're providing is fact, not fiction. And that's the true message behind professional forensic photography.
Jay Barnhart knew he had a case for the murder of Jack Sebastian. But he'd rely on Reeves and his high-tech tools to make it bulletproof.
I got a case of this biker.
Every fatal wound tells a tale. In the case of Jack Sebastian, the injuries around the wound completed the story. When a gun fires, it shoots more than projectiles. From the muzzle comes a flash of fire, a blast of gas, a puff of smoke, and a shower of sparks. Each can leave its mark. Place the muzzle of a gun directly against the target, and all this debris goes into the wound. Pull the muzzle further away, and the debris becomes more and more dispersed. The forensic photographs of Sebastian's injuries showed the stippling wounds. They also revealed bruising under the eyes, on the nose, and on the cheek. Barnhart believed the damage was caused by the open petals of the shot cup, a plastic sleeve that holds the buckshot. But how far away would the shotgun have to be to allow the shot cup petals to open? Barnhart and Reeves believed high-speed photography could provide the definitive answer.
And it allows the doctors and the police that are investigating the case to be able to see things we can't see with the human eye, things that are moving as fast as Mach 15.
High-speed photography can stop a bullet in midair. More than that, it allows investigators to examine, frame by frame, the impact and damage that bullet produces as it connects with its target. Wounds can then be matched with bullets. In cases where no weapon is found or a bullet isn't recovered, a series of high-speed photos may help investigators make the identification. Reeves and Barnhart designed an experiment to determine the distance between Sebastian's head and the muzzle of the gun that killed him.
I don't know if there's any, I think we have film in the 35.
I'm going to crank it in there after it's in the vise.
They mounted a shotgun on a rack, held perfectly level. Next, they positioned two cameras along the line of fire. As the shell and debris left the muzzle, they would fly past the cameras, which would snap their picture. It was crucial that the gun not move when fired. They loaded the gun with the same type of ammunition that killed Sebastian.
Let it go.
Fire in the hole. Okay.
Reeves then placed a sensitive microphone near the muzzle of the gun. When the microphone picks up the sound of the shotgun blast, it trips a flash unit. A ruler placed behind the microphone measures how far the shell travels as the shot cup petals begin to open. The high-speed flash fires for 1/2 millionth of a second, necessary when photographing at blazing speeds. For the clearest image, Reeves and Barnhart need the camera to be as close to the flying shell as possible, but must determine the best place to put it. They first try the test with a large format Polaroid camera. The fast-developing film allows them to take test photos of the experiment so they can position the second camera correctly. For the actual test, they use a standard 35mm camera with highly sensitive film to freeze the shell in its path. The investigators are now ready to try their experiment and catch a shell with a flash of light. If all goes well, they'll produce an irrefutable record of the shell and its components in flight. Barnhart can then use the information to verify where the plastic petals on the shot cup began to open into the pattern that damaged Sebastian's face. Each time the gun is fired, Reeves inches the microphone away from the muzzle. As a result, the flash will go off a little later. The projectile will travel a little farther. The camera will catch it as it opens in flight. Initially, the white-hot plastic shot cup hasn't expanded. After 18 inches, the petals begin to spread, discharging the pellets and falling away. At about 30 inches, the petals have fully opened. Barnhart and Reeves succeed in making a photographic point-by-point map of a shotgun shell's trajectory. By comparing the wound with the pictures, investigators determined the gun was fired from a distance of 18 to 24 inches from Sebastian's face. The results corroborated Barnhart's own experiments and gave him the evidence he needed to prove Sebastian couldn't have possibly shot himself. Police then confronted Sebastian's girlfriend, Diane Shelton, with the evidence. She confessed to pulling the trigger and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Unlike any other tool, forensic photography can expose evidence that would otherwise have been missed. And sometimes, photographs are the only way to prove a crime was committed at all. When a Pennsylvania coroner was certain a tragic accident camouflaged a mass murder, his photographs became his only allies. Forensic photography played a crucial role in the investigation of a devastating fire in a nursing home. Retired Wayne County, Pennsylvania coroner Robert Jennings spent 6 years trying to prove the fiery deaths were no accident. Jennings has spent much of his life combining his role as coroner and his love of photography. He has been snapping shots for more than 45 years.
We got some fire fire to the left here. Let's go knock that down before we go in.
His story begins on the grim night of October 19, 1971. A fire killed all 15 residents of the Geiger Nursing Home, a private home attached to a farmhouse near Honesdale, Pennsylvania. Most of the victims were found in their beds, dead from smoke inhalation. A few were overcome as they crawled on the floor. As coroner, Jennings rushed to the scene. State police and firefighters had begun removing bodies before Jennings had a chance to document the area. After asking the firemen to stop, Jennings began photographing all he could. The location of the victims could prove important. Jennings tried to track the blaze with his camera lens inside the pitch-dark building. Time was of the essence. He went right to work, hoping his pictures could help determine what caused the blaze. But the darkness and smoke foiled his efforts. Reluctantly, he went home to await the sunrise. By the time he returned the next morning, the smoke had cleared and the gloom had lifted enough for him to get his shots of the ruins.
If your normal f-stop would be f11, then you would have to open up at least 2 more stops and give it more light to get the detail and so forth that's needed in this type of evidence photography, that at least arson experts have an opportunity to examine the charring and so forth.
Working in the crumbling shell of the building was time-consuming and treacherous. But Jennings was determined to commit every inch of the wreckage to film. He succeeded. Painting with light revealed details of an alligator burn, a charring pattern similar to the rough scales of the reptile. The pattern is created at very high temperatures. By illuminating the area from several angles, Jennings photographed the changes in the burn pattern. Later, he would refer to his photographs to trace the fire's path. Burn patterns on the walls suggested the blaze tore through the hallway. A section of the corridor was almost totally consumed. In one spot, the fire burned a hole in the floor. The destruction at this spot was unlike anywhere else in the building. Jennings focused his attention and his camera on the hole. He crawled under it, photographing its edges. Fires usually burn from the bottom up, igniting whatever's above them. But at this spot, the fire looked to have burned from the top down. To Jennings, that suggested an accelerant was used, some flammable liquid that seeped through the floor, carrying flames with it. Before Jennings completed his investigation, state police announced their findings. They concluded the fire began in the laundry room, caused by a bad thermocoupling in a clothes dryer. Jennings wasn't buying it. He'd spend the next 6 years trying to prove them wrong. Photographs were Jennings' only clues. The ceiling above the dryer where the state police said the fire started showed minimal damage compared to the highly charred hallway. The wires in the laundry room were still intact. Jennings even found unburned clothing inside the dryer. Picture by picture, he continued building his case. Today, a quarter-century later, Jennings' evidence remains, though the building is long gone.
Within a few weeks after the fire, the building is totally destroyed and demolished, razed. So therefore, the evidence that I photographed, that's gone. And if you don't have the photographs there to support, to look it over, it's pretty hard to solve a crime.
For Jennings, not much has changed in the art and science of photography since he snapped his first picture. Today, as he did 25 years ago in the Geiger nursing home case, he processes his own photographs by hand, carefully controlling every step of exposure, developing, and printing. He sharpened his skills, both as a photographer and an investigator. He's gained a better sense of what to look for and how to capture it on film. A charred piece of timber, a pile of debris. These seemingly trivial objects can be clues that make or break a case. Jennings has to be sure no detail is overlooked. An investigation is a lot like a roll of exposed film. All the information is there. You just have to know how to make it visible. In his darkroom, Jennings exposes many secrets. And in the process, he sometimes develops even more questions. State police were impressed by Jennings' photographs, but still wouldn't concede the fire was arson. They didn't waver for one simple reason: no suspect. If the fire had been deliberately set, who lit the match? In the end, Jennings' pictures exposed him. Hoping to prove the fire was deliberately set, Jennings turned to Nurse Vaudine Lyon, the sole survivor of the blaze. She told him about one of the home's gentlest patients, Mr. Maurice Flynn. Mr. Flynn, a deeply shy and private man, would end each day in his room, reading the Bible by candlelight. So it was odd that after the fire, Flynn's body was found seated in the room of a married couple. He was the only patient not in his own room when the fire occurred. He was also the only patient found completely naked. Scarcely burned, he died seated in a chair with his arms and legs extended, as though crucified.
He was known as the gentleman of the house. He was there to help people, but he was very private. He wouldn't even leave a nurse or anyone with him when he's taking a shower. He just didn't want any help. And this was always a puzzling part as to why this particular person was found this distance away.
Flynn's own room was some 60 feet from where his body was found. The smoke and flame would have made that simple walk impossible. Jennings determined the blaze started at the intersection of the hallways. In order for Flynn to get to the couple's room during the fire, he would have had to pass right through it. On the other hand, if he wanted to escape the blaze, the exit was near his room, easily within his reach.
And it's impossible that he could have come down that distance and through that T intersection with the type of physical evidence that we found on his body, because he would have never made it, and he would have been completely charred.
Jennings wondered why Flynn was so far from his room while most everyone else died in bed from the fast-spreading blaze. On June 8, 1972, Robert Jennings exhumed the body of Maurice Flynn. Even before the autopsy, Jennings noticed something odd. Flynn's skin was almost cherry red, indicating carbon monoxide poisoning. The autopsy showed Flynn's lung tissue had absorbed gasoline vapors shortly before he died. More clues came out during Lyon's interview. Flynn was the only resident in the home allowed to have matches to light the candles by which he read his Bible. He also mowed the lawn around the nursing home, making him one of the only residents with access to gasoline. behaved strangely the day before the fire, ranting and citing biblical verse. The home's other residents also acted strangely. They paid off forgotten debts and talked of a journey to a better place.
Everything centered around the strange events of Mr. Flynn, why he was completely naked. One of his comments to one of the nurses on duty that day was that you come in this world naked and you leave it naked. And that stuck in our minds a lot with finding his completely nude body.
It looked like Jennings had his suspect. But state police wouldn't revise their conclusions. Jennings persisted. By early 1975, Jennings was confident that he had enough evidence to prove his case. He exercised his powers as coroner and swore in a jury of 6 men and women. He presented his findings while the state police defended their position during the 2-day legal battle. Afterward, the jury concluded the fire was caused by an illegal act by a person or persons unknown. They ruled that investigators should attempt to discover who caused the 15 deaths. Why Flynn set the fire will never be known. Some have speculated that his actions were the result of a deranged mind. Others have said Flynn and the other nursing home residents had all agreed to die, thinking it better to end their lives than live in the home. In the end, the closest we may ever come to finding out the cause of the fire lies in Jennings' photographs and his efforts at solving this crime. After the coroner jury's verdict, Jennings filled out the death certificates of the residents of the Geiger nursing home. 14 homicides and a suicide.
It was worth the effort. I felt that I had a duty to represent the other 14 people that paid a price, their lives in this particular incident, and particularly for the families as well.
Forensic photography is the new detective's secret weapon. Often overlooked, it is crucial in a criminal investigation. Through sophisticated camera equipment, determination, and ingenuity, forensic photographers become the eyes and memories of investigators. They are also the advocates of the victims, helping bring criminals to justice.